I got lucky. I was given a second chance, right?
You're not remorseful and you were insensitive on those other podcasts because you truly don't care.
There's been times where I've said some stuff that could be insensitive.
I don't think that anybody could be insensitive if they accidentally murdered someone.
Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every single upload. You know I love and I appreciate you so much. Today we have a lot to get into, and big shout out to Miss Peyton for this case. Peyton, her mom and sister are absolute treasures that I met at CrimeCon 2 years ago. And Peyton actually put this case together, and I'm so thankful because it was one that recently caught my eye and I wanted to dive into. We're talking about the case of Ryan Roth, and her synopsis of it in her notes, and I feel the exact same way, so I'm going to share that with you, is enraged beyond words, shaking, crying, yelling, and infuriating. And yeah, girl, same. Now, something that caught both of our eyes initially is that Ryan's killer is currently out free. He does podcasts talking poorly about Ryan. He presents himself as this like Christian life coach, but then also like morphs into like different personas depending on who he's talking to. He's also like constantly re-traumatizing his victim's family and even reached out and texted his victim's son. So we are going to get into all of that. Before we do, I have a quick message for you. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Magic Spoon. I said it in my last video with Magic Spoon. I am in my protein era, and I feel like if you're not like in the same thing, like really understanding like how much protein your body needs based on like how you calculate and do your macros and stuff, you're not realizing like how much you actually need, and how if you get bored of food, I'm like touch and go. I feel like when I'm like in my snackish era, there's like no era. If I'm like in my snackish days, there's no controlling me. So I need something that I can grab that's like super easy, just in the bag, snack on it, and then meanwhile, I'm also getting protein. And the reason I say that is because somebody said in the last video, well, just eat eggs and cheese. And it's like, you know what? Agreed. There is a time and place for eggs and cheese. Being a lactose intolerant girly, the cheese portion, I like not people around me. So I like finding other things that are really high in protein, low in sugar, and makes me just, feel full. And that's exactly what Magic Spoon does. It's taken like all of the nostalgia of cereal that we grew up with and reimagined it. Their cereal has 13 to 14 grams of protein per serving, 0 sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. So, if you're also calculating all of that, you know that those numbers are super impressive. The best part is that they were once known just like specifically for their cereal. Now they have added to their roster. They also have crispy treats, which is so much lighter than your usual protein bar. Also, their granola bites. Those are like in each room of the house. I've got some in my studio so that if I need, to grab something to snack on, in my bedroom, they're in the living room. I love those, and just having them nearby, because then I just have a couple and I'm good. So for the crispy treats, each one of them has 11 to 12 grams of protein, just 1 gram of sugar, and only 1 to 2 grams of net carbs. Perfect for just also throwing into your bag if you're running out the door. And then for my granola lovers, their high protein granola has 13 grams of protein and 0 added sugar. They have flavors like honey almond and peanut butter. Peanut butter, oh my goodness. I can't get enough. If you want to try Magic Spoon, just go over to magicspoon.com/Sherrilyn or scan the QR code on the screen. Don't forget to use my code Sherrilyn for $5 off your order. The best part is there is no risk. Magic Spoon has 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't love it, they will refund you, no questions asked. Once again, you can try it risk-free by going over to magicspoon.com/Sherrilyn or scan the QR code on your screen and use my code Sherrilyn for $5 off your order. Thank you so much, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring today's video. Okay, let's get started. So a lot of the information that Peyton got was actually from Ryan's wife, Heather. She posts a lot about the case on her TikTok, also has a blog with a lot of information. So I'm going to have all of her stuff linked in the description, and you can get a chance to also see like some of those posts here as well. But I highly recommend going over and supporting Heather and, letting her know that we're all here for her. I want to start with getting into who Ryan was. Ryan Roth was a 33-year-old father, husband, son, and brother. He was was born September 7th, 1988 in Petaluma, California. He was the youngest of 6 children to his parents, Geraldine and Mike. Geraldine described him as a very loud personality, but very welcoming and polite. He was a hilarious and magnetic person who Heather said always left people laughing or shaking their heads. He lived his life going full throttle and approached everything with enthusiasm and passion. He loved life and was always jumping into the next adventure, which 1000% reminds me of my husband. I think that's a large part of why I also gravitated to this case, was just like the way like his personality was described. Heather and Ryan met when she was just about to turn 18, and she said Ryan was her first love. It sounds like it was one of those connections where they were virtually inseparable and wild about each other from the get-go. They did go on to get married. They had 2 beautiful sons together, Chase and Raph, who Heather said were the highlights of Ryan's life. They were pretty much living out their dream together. They had a successful plumbing company. They built a beautiful home, all the things that you hope and do to achieve with your partner. Unfortunately, though, as many families have experienced, Heather said that Ryan felt the weight of all of that responsibility, and it led to him falling into an addiction with opioids. And I think this is really important to just kind of stop and acknowledge at this moment too, because I think it's easy to automatically assume that because someone is, living their dream and working hard doesn't mean that the pressure and stress of what something positive entails can take its toll on over time and lead to. Obviously, Heather wanted her husband to get help right then and there, but again, something that is very common, no matter how much you love someone or how much they love you, you can't make them get the help. No matter how much you see them struggling and just want them to see, like how you see them in your eyes, it's far easier said than done for someone to just listen, get help right now, and then immediately do it. So they ended up separating, and Ryan moved to Lake of Pines, California, where his mother lived. Now, Heather said that even though they were separated, they were still trying to work on issues. They still loved each other deeply, and all Heather wanted was for Ryan to get clean and get better for himself and their family. And that really needs to be acknowledged, because since Heather has taken to TikTok to share her story, there have been many people who support Ryan's killer that have felt compelled to go to Heather's page and try to poke holes in her story, being like, well, you guys weren't even together at the time. And it's like, yeah, babe, people go through shit. Also, their narrative is going based off of a killer's version of the story. Why they hold, more weight to that than Heather, Ryan's actual wife, I have no idea. Also, we'll see, his story has not really been consistent. But something that, he and his supporters kind of run with is that Ryan was heavily using and that he and Heather were getting a divorce. Heather says otherwise. Heather, however, says that at the time of this case, Ryan was 6 months sober. He even had his sobriety chip from the meetings that he was actively attending. Heather says Ryan was doing all of the right things and taking all of the right steps because he was determined to get Heather back and get their family back together. They were even getting to the point where they had just celebrated Valentine's Day together again. Heather admits that she wasn't 100% ready to just jump back in, and a large part of that is because she knew that Ryan was, kind of still hanging around people who were struggling and weren't really where he was. This is something that she says is very characteristic of Ryan, though. If he saw you as a friend and knew help was possible, he wanted to help you achieve that. And one of those people that Ryan unfortunately found himself around was Brandon Riddell Terrell. Allegedly, these two weren't necessarily really close. Heather hadn't even heard about him, but it has been rumored that Brandon was somewhat jealous of Ryan. They kind of had one of those relationships where, Ryan was loud and boisterous and confident. I think he probably, saw qualities that he wanted for himself in him. Ryan was also somebody who was hardworking, had built a successful home and business. He had a family who loved him. He had just gotten sober and he was turning his life around. And Brandon, on the other hand, was on the run after he had cut off his ankle monitor on September 7th, 2012. He was on probation, actually, after a domestic violence incident, which I think is very important piece of information to hold on to. He likes to put his hands on people. So something to consider here in this time era when this happened is it's 2012, all right? So Mary Jane, if you will, and dispensaries on every street corner, it was not a thing. I'm personally of the mindset where that should have always been a thing, where there was dispensaries on like in like most places, like on every street corner. Like if there was liquor stores this whole time, then there probably should have been dispensaries as well. And I can't even smoke weed anymore. Like girl, that is not a scene you want to see. The way Heather describes it, which I think is adorable, is like the way many people did it, you know, back in the day was, you know, you'd grow it from yourself or like from a guy, from yourself for yourself, or like get it like from a guy. And Ryan was one of those guys that had this like little grow room in his garage. And she said, think of it as like, you know, people who made moonshine during the Prohibition. Makes sense, right? Now, after that, there was liquor stores everywhere. Now, weed is very, very accessible everywhere. So from what my understanding is like Brandon was this acquaintance of his pretty much, and Ryan had like hired him to help with like doing trimmings. So they were together on February 22nd, 2012, and both Ryan and Brandon had decided to get some food at a nearby Applebee's with a few other friends. They were with Chris Filson, Chase Wright, and Brian Grainer. Brandon had also invited a couple girls to eat out with them as well, one of them being Melissa Lawrence, who I think was like sort of dating him at the time, and Yvonne Zapita. I believe Yvonne is also referred to as Denise by certain witnesses as well. Like, so if you're looking at the case file and are confused, but we'll just stick with Yvonne. Before going to Applebee's, Yvonne picked up 1 to 2 grams of Coca-Cola. Let's call it that. And Melissa testified that at dinner, Brandon had at least 2 drinks with hard alcohol, and the rest of the group was also drinking on top of, you know, having drugs also involved, but Ryan was not. After eating, everybody decided to head back to Ryan's. I think they were originally supposed to like all help trim his bud, but according to Melissa, they had pretty much like wrapped it up the night before, so they were more in, like the guests were more in party mode, again, except for Ryan, who at one point even left his house to go fix his aunt's sink and even called his mom to express how fed up and annoyed he was that everybody was like at his house, just like kind of like started drinking and partying around him. When he gets back, everyone is still partying it up, especially Brandon, who witnesses said was basically like drinking out of the bottle. He was under the influence of alcohol, cocaine, weed, and nitrous oxide, also known as whippets. And something important to also, you know, consider here is like this is not like a one-off. It wasn't, you know, the first time that Brandon had ever like tried any of these substances together or on their own. He was allegedly familiar with, you know, using drugs, combining drugs, and everyone else who was also using that night said that they did not feel any unusual effects. So like had also been familiar with it, and it wasn't like one of those things of like, oh, like something happened with this batch and lost our minds. They were like, yeah, we had all done this numerous times and there wasn't anything unusual about it. Now, Yvonne testified that Brandon was very visibly intoxicated and for the most part kind of like talking in circles and gibberish, I guess. Most of which that was articulated though was that he was very angry. At one point, he even pulled out a 5-inch double-edged serrated blade and said, "This is the knife I use to put people 6 feet under." Brian, who was another witness, also testified hearing Brandon say, "This is going to be savage. I'm going out like a gangster." Hearing that, I was just like, oh God, like I feel like so many of us can relate to like encountering someone like this just like a not obnoxious tough guy at a bar who's just like belligerent and you're just like, ew. Usually in that situation, the rule of thumb is to do your best to ignore and don't engage, which is pretty much what Ryan was doing. Around 11 p.m., he decided to just go chill in his bedroom and talk on the phone with Heather for a bit. And during that conversation, they were talking about getting back together, and he was trying to convince Heather to sell the house and then move to Auburn. Heather said that it became a small argument, and she ended up just hanging up the phone with him around midnight.
One thing that I want to say is that what happened, that I talked to Ryan on the phone the night that he died. We were on the phone for an hour. At about 12:30 at night, we got off the phone. So when I got this phone call the next day, I just didn't believe it. I was like, what? Like, when somebody tells you something like that, you can't process it. It took me a while to process it. I just was basically on the floor, just like a mess, not understanding what was happening. And I was like, no, I was on the phone with him last night. What is going on? It was quiet. I didn't know. He said that he just had a couple friends over watching movies. I had no idea that they were trimming weed. I did not know that. The conversation was all based around us getting back together. Ryan wanted me to move up there. I didn't want to sell the house. I felt like I had established myself and gotten very independent, and I was really proud of that. And so I really needed to see proof that this was going to be a healthy situation for us. And so I was doing the right thing. So the fact that there's people like calling me out for that right now is super weird. So yeah, we were kind of arguing on the phone that night. It was, and you know, that's something that I've really learned a huge lesson about, because I was so mad at him I hung up on him. And then he texted me and he said, I'm really sorry about the conversation. Let's get off on the right foot tomorrow. And I just like cannot believe the way that we ended.
Obviously, we weren't in Ryan's head to know why, but he left his bedroom after this and went into the living room and laid down on the couch while the group was, still up watching movies and partying. I feel like it's, a safe assumption to say that maybe Ryan just like came out to probably distract himself like from that argument that he and Heather had. But what we do know for sure is that Ryan was not on any substance that night, and this was confirmed by the coroner. He was sober. Unfortunately, due to the fact that witnesses were under the influence, their statements are kind of all over the place. However, the things they have all said and agreed on is that Ryan was sober. He was not aggressive. He was laying on the couch when Brandon went berserk and started attacking Ryan. According to witnesses, this just like seemed to come out of nowhere. Brandon just randomly stood up from the table and started yelling, "I'm not going to jail. I'm going out like a mother effing gangster," while pacing and waving this knife that he had around, which obviously freaks everybody out. One witness said Ryan tried to take the knife away from him by reaching up from the couch. Others have said that he was just laying on the couch, possibly even falling asleep. And this is kind of more where the detectives' theories are as well. They believe Ryan didn't even have a chance to move or get up. Every witness testified, though, that Ryan was not aggressive or trying to fight at all, and that Brandon came at Ryan with this 5-inch knife that he had and stabbed Ryan 18 times in the head, neck, torso, and arms. Ryan was yelling stop as Brandon's attacking him, and at one point tried to shove him off of him, but he just kept going. The two other guys that were there, Chris and Brian, said that they tried to wrestle Brandon off of Ryan, but he was just like freakishly strongly, just like at that point, just so enraged and determined to end Ryan's life is what it seemed like. They had to like continue wrestling with him and eventually were able to pry the knife out of his hands and throw it outside so that he couldn't grab it again. But at that point, unfortunately, Ryan's injuries were too severe. Ryan sadly died within 15 to 30 minutes. This is devastating. On his own blood in his friend's arms. Thinking about those last moments for me is absolutely gut-wrenching, and I feel like I just want to take a moment because I'm sure like there will be somebody who comes across this video randomly who has never experienced hardship in their lives and will have 100 opinions, but something I want to make really clear on where I stand is that no one deserves to suffer or die like that, especially somebody who is minding their business, trying their best to rebuild their life with what they have, and welcomed a monster into their home. Ryan's injuries were absolutely horrific. Trigger warning, will censor for YouTube guidelines, but I feel like, it's still important because you will get the idea. The coroner testified that Ryan had a deep wound on the top of his skull that caused bone fragment to be uplifted. His ear was severed. He had blood in his lungs, indicating that he was alive, trying to breathe. He had a stab wound on his cervical spine, which was a downward strike from Brandon while Ryan was incapacitated. He also had multiple deep chest wounds and a stab wound through his shoulder into his collarbone. Absolutely heinous. According to Chase Wright, another of the friends that was there that night, after having the knife wrestled away from him, Brandon took a step back and looked at Ryan. And instead of, being appalled or disgusted with his actions, he just turns to Chase and says, "God can only judge me," before grabbing his girlfriend, Melissa, and fleeing the scene. Now, Peyton had mentioned that there were some sources that say Brandon kidnapped her, but in her testimony, she doesn't really recall it that way. We also know that there was substance use going on, which also affects things. Also, we obviously have trauma that she's experienced with seeing the outcome of how gruesome that attack was. Melissa said she was using the bathroom when Brandon stabbed Ryan and thought that she was just hearing some guys wrestling, but when she walked out of the washroom, that's when she saw Ryan laying in a pool of blood. She said that both her and Yvonne had called 911, and then Brandon just took her and said, "You need to get me out of here." And so she grabbed her keys and went off with Brandon. She says as they leave, she's processing everything. She's also admits she's under the influence, in shock by seeing Ryan's body, and then asks Brandon, what happened? And he said, "I killed him. I effing killed him. This is ride or die shit. This is Bonnie and Clyde shit now. you're my ride. He also made a call to his mother, basically same thing, like rambling and raging, which as Melissa's hearing this is all hitting her, and she freaks out because, you know, she's like, oh my God, like this is insane. I want no part of this. So she said she pulls over, turns the car off, and like is just like desperate, like somehow she's gonna get out of this situation, just like processing. So she said this is when Brandon lunges over to her seat, right for her throat, and starts strangling her. Now, when I was reading through all of this, like in its entirety, the first time, all I could think about was the similarities between Wade Wilson. It's like same thing, like went to go like party with somebody and then kills her, leaves, calling the parents, gets in a car with the girlfriend, tries to also kill her or tries to get her in the car to kill her. It's just like, it's wild when you actually look at it that way. Melissa was able to also get away like Wade Wilson's girlfriend was. She eventually just like threw herself out of the car, ran and hid in the bushes until she knew he was gone, but you know, still had like bruising and scars from his fingernails in her for weeks. So when she threw herself out of the car, Brandon steals the car, drives off. And so she waves the car down and had them take her to a nearby gas station where 2 officers happened to be. At this point, everyone's kind of like figuring out, again, the similarities with like Wade Wilson is just insane. So by this point also, Brandon's mom had also called the police and said to them that her son was having a psychotic break, and if they encountered him, don't shoot him. Police did ultimately find him. They chased him through 3 counties and even had to like deploy spike strips, but he just keeps going. Allegedly, before he was caught, he's still on the phone with his mom, saying that he's Jesus and a warrior. And when his mother asked what happened to Ryan, he told her Ryan's fine. Eventually, he did stop the car, but refused to cooperate and was ultimately taken down by a police dog. Once he was in custody, he was actually taken to Kaiser South Hospital for a mental evaluation. I'm sure that that was like, you know, due to his mom's claims that he was experiencing psychosis or a psychotic break. And according to court transcripts and also Heather's blog, Brandon's behavior was described as cold and detached. He showed no signs of confusion or psychosis and didn't even ask about Ryan or what happened once. The only thing that he asked about was where his money and belongings were. Now, besides the fact that this man is now, you know, influencer slash podcaster profiting off of the crime he committed, what's just as upsetting to Ryan's family is that once Brandon was arrested, Ryan's family was sold, you know, like a lot of, I think what they feel is like empty promises by officials. They were told that this was going to trial and that this was going to be a slam dunk case, and that is not what happened. Initially, the hearings kept getting pushed back because Brandon's family was trying to get money for an attorney. Allegedly, they sold their house so that they could afford a high-priced attorney and bail. And at first, Brandon tried the whole like self-defense plea, which is the narrative that's kind of like worked its way back after several. We'll get into that in a minute. Then his story was that 2 guys came in and jumped in and he was being set up. So it wasn't him at all. And it's not even worth entertaining this at all because between witness statements, forensic evidence, and the fact that he's, you know, back to the self-defense story now, that was not true. So once that story was, you know, shot out of the water, he changes it again. This time it was he couldn't remember anything from that night. He was blacked out because of drugs and alcohol. And because of this, Brandon was offered a plea of voluntary manslaughter by reasons of insanity and took it, obviously. How he was able to take an insanity plea for voluntarily taking drugs and getting drunk is wild and infuriating. Again, this is giving Wade Wilson. You know, it's like same narrative and excuses all around here. He admits that he was, and I'm not like, I feel this, Wade is exactly where he needs to, but it's like when you look at this, I just can't. Wade's where he's supposed to be, and this guy wasn't even charged for murder, which is what was committed. He was under the influence by his choice. All of the witnesses were like, no, like he was not insane here. Like, well, obviously insane, but like voluntary manslaughter for reasons of insanity. Like, come on. He also wasn't even charged for what he did to Melissa, like trying to strangle her and her like escaping. As far as we know, he also didn't have to pay any restitution for the police chase and has never had any consequences for taking his ankle monitor off either. Like, this is just wild to me. He only served 11 years in prison before being released on parole in 2022. So 11 years for stabbing a defenseless unprovoking person 18 times. He couldn't even serve a year for each wound. Ryan's family said that was bad enough, but things got worse after he was released, and he decided to move to Petaluma, California, where Ryan was from and where his family still lived. This is something that they say affects them deeply and re-traumatizes them every time they think about the fact that he lives near them and that there's a chance of running into him. Brandon says that this was a decision that was made because his new wife, Lacey, that he met while in prison, and their children lived there, not because of Ryan. And, when asked about it, doesn't really seem to care about how his, face is traumatizing, to his victim's family or what hearing him say about Ryan does to them. So not only was he able to go home to a family, something Ryan will never do again, he monetizes his story, trying to defend his actions and paint Ryan as the monster. He has rebranded being a Christian life coach and has done multiple podcasts talking about the night he killed Ryan. He runs a program called 11 with an 8 Recovery Solution. I just have to put a shout out for Peyton because in her notes, she put in brackets, dumb, and it's still funny. Yeah, agreed. Allegedly, his mission is to help men rise above their circumstances, and talks about, hey, who thought I was going to go with circumcision there for a minute? I did. I was like, whoa, let's tread lightly, Sherrilyn. I didn't, but I felt like I had to share that with you. I'm so sorry. Okay. He talks about how he spent, a decade in prison and found God, and according to him, has become a better man. And Heather has said it best. She says that he's portraying himself as a mentor and a man of redemption, but he's twisting the facts to suit his narrative, and even blames and puts a lot of blame on Ryan by saying that Ryan hit him. So what I think is really upsetting is that now, even though he says he's a better man and wants to help others, he has changed his story again and is saying that Ryan hit him first, despite not one witness seeing or testifying to that.
After that is, February 23rd, 2012, and we were growing, me and Ryan, we had a bunch of pot we were growing. I was up there at the property that he was staying at, that we were growing at together. And, we were supposed to, there's like 50 pounds that were supposed to be ready, and it wasn't ready. And there was something going on that weekend. I wanted to get back home and get ready for, I think it was a motorcycle run or motorcycle event. And, I remember we went to the gym in the morning, and I was like, dude, I'm just going to jam back and come back up here when everything's done. And he's like, no, just stay the night. We'll have a good time. Right. And that saying, we're going to have a good time it just haunts me every time I hear that and think about it. And so we went out to dinner that night with some of the folks that were trimming, and there were some girls that came out. And I remember sitting at the table, waitress is taking orders and everybody's ordering drinks. And I'm have this internal conversation with myself, this battle, Brandon, don't do it. You don't need a drink. And they get to me, what the heck, one drink ain't gonna, kill nobody, right? Or hurt nobody. So I ordered a drink, and within hours after that, I was arrested for murder.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So we went from there. When and one drink led to
I must have missed something, man. I went from you having one drink to being charged with murder.
Yeah. So we obviously had dinner, and then we went to the Safeway, grabbed a bunch of liquor, went back to the house. Everybody's partying, drinking, and I'm right back in it. And there was some stuff that me and Ryan had going on, and I get pretty wasted, and me and him had a little disagreement, and one thing led to the next. He took a punch on me, and but at the time, I'm going to rewind just to take it in more context. I've always been someone of intuition and that feeling. And I remember thinking there's something ain't right in this house. There's something funny going on. Right. And I told myself, Brandon, you should probably just leave, go get a hotel, get out of here. You know what I mean? Remove yourself from the situation. But then the devil on my shoulder's nah, dude, you ain't running. You ain't going nowhere. There's a big ass buck knife right there on the end table. You know what I mean? Anything goes on, you got that, hey, you might die, but take someone with you. That was literally the conversation I had with myself. Right. And
you're drunk at this moment.
And I'm I'm drunk, but there's just bad intuition. People are acting weird. And then me and Ryan, you know, kind of had some words, and he blasted, you know, he punched me. And then, you know, from there, it just kind of went into a blackout, and, you know, I grabbed the knife, and, you know, I ended up taking his life. And, you know, in that moment,
what's really frustrating is had Brandon said any of this in court, there would have been no plea offer. It would have shown motive and that he knew what he was doing. He was offered that plea because his narrative was that he has no recollection of anything, no recollection of what had happened at all. But the minute he gets out of jail, all of a sudden he remembers, you know, like, I was in an emotional state. I was just trying to defend myself, which again, none of what he said before. Also, nothing that aligns with witness statements or police reports or forensics. If you can tolerate listening to him enough, you'll notice that his narrative changes also depending on like what audience he's trying to appeal to. So when he was on a Navy SEALs podcast, he tried to appeal to that like dark military humor. On appearance on a Christian podcast, he definitely played it out for those folks, and then also has gone like into like infiltrate like the sobriety community. He's kind of like a chameleon from what I gather, in my opinion, you know, just kind of like forming to whatever he knows like will work based on that audience. He's even gone as far to say that he has no way of feeling any empathy for Ryan's family. And I think that that is an utter slap in the face. I will say though that Heather is an absolute badass for not taking this man's actions laying down. She actually made flyers with Brandon's face on it and said like murder, and posted them all around the town to warn the community about this man. I want to read a quote here that Peyton had. I think it just says everything beautifully. So this is from Heather. It says, "It's not about the injustice of that early release, but it's the fact that he's now out creating a platform for himself while Ryan will never have a chance to live his life. For me and my family, it's just reopened wounds that we've spent years trying to heal. It's angering and heartbreaking and deeply unfair to us." That breaks my absolute heart. There has got to be, I don't know, something out there that if you are going to talk about this and you have been convicted and charged with taking somebody's life, there is no monetization for sharing that, especially now with the narrative flipping. But wait, we're not done yet. There is more. As if he hasn't done enough. Okay, so at the time of Ryan's death, his sons were 6 and 8 years old. And by the way, like, again, that's a whole other element. Like, Heather still is like heartbroken every time. Like, she just remembers the day that she had to tell her sons that, you know, like their dad wasn't coming back and that he was murdered. So it wasn't enough that, you know, in my opinion, because of a lie, just based on like how the story is going now, I believe that that was a lie that he knew he was telling, my opinion, got, again, my opinion, slap on the wrist for what he had done, as if that wasn't enough and that he didn't get away with enough. Brandon thought to himself, you know what? I think that I am all that. I am holier than thou, and I am going to text one of Ryan and Heather's sons. That's what I'm going to do. And he did. He did.
Brandon texted my son today. Can you believe that? I am just like, wow, you text him? And not just because you got off parole today, because this is going viral and you don't like this bad stuff going on about you and being said after you just had all these followers and all this support. And so you think that, you think that by getting in his good graces that you can use that as part of your story now and saying, I apologized to his son and he accepted my apology. I mean, this is Brandon. I'm open to doing anything to help bring healing to you and your family. I couldn't respond to your text before in the past because of parole. That's what you're gonna say? Chase texted him a couple years ago when he was living in our area. He's since moved out since I flyered the shit out of our town. And he said, you know, if we ever run into you, I hope that you keep your head down and keep walking. And that's all he said to him. So something to that effect. So I could not with that. Like, that is that an apology? Like, no, I don't think that we need you for healing at this point. And if you are willing to do anything, I can think of a couple things you could do. I mean, I can't say it on this live, but anyway, so.
I personally feel like he has done, my opinion, some truly disturbing things deliberately. Like, I don't know how you can take it any other way, but as taunting Ryan's family or like boasting about, I guess, like kind of getting away with something. He had another brilliant idea when he went to Disneyland with his family and decided to wear a shirt that said, "Dead men tell no tales." Or what about the time that he decided to post a photo of him and Ryan on the anniversary of Ryan's death? The man he killed and stabbed 18 times. The words are unable to word thinking about all that. Peyton put something so perfectly. She said, for him, this is a story to glorify and profit off of, and to Ryan's family, this is straight up torture, which based on their actions appears that Brandon and his family seem to have no empathy towards. As we can tell from this clip that you're about to see of one of Heather's lives, where Brandon's mom joins in, and you can see.
Look at I see that Brandon's mom is on here saying that I was dating somebody at the time, and I actually wasn't.
How
but you know,
appropriate.
one thing that I want to point out about you, Mom, is the thing that you did when you walked up to Ryan's mom, who was grieving her son, right in front of me when we were at the courthouse, and you said, well, you know, I miss my son too. And right there, I knew that these people were just not cut from the same cloth. Like, who says that? Who says that to a mother that just had her son murdered by your son? What kind of human? And then, just about a couple years ago, Geraldine, Ryan's mom, was grocery shopping with her little support dog. This woman has never been the same since she lost her baby. And she ran into Jean, at the, I'm getting distracted, at the grocery store. And she complained that she had her dog and had her kicked out of the frickin' grocery store. So these are the people. This is the family. And so Jean sold, I think, her house or something. She got a ton of money together to get this bigwig attorney, from what I understand. And this is where I'm going to have to bring my mom in, okay? And yeah.
Now, something else that Peyton had found, which I think is really interesting and I think potentially explains where Brandon's mind frame was that night and why he was talking about not going to jail, is that on Valentine's Day, so like a week before Ryan was killed, one of Ryan's friends' houses got robbed. This friend suspected that this could have been Brandon, allegedly, and this friend sent Ryan a picture on February 22nd, the day that he was killed, of police taking fingerprints off of a TV at his house trying to identify the robber. So the theory here is maybe Ryan asked about it, or Brandon somehow saw the messages and he got super paranoid. You know, we also have to remember, like, he was also wanted at the time because he cut off his ankle monitor. So, you know, like, that thought could also be stewing in him. And then we have the witnesses that said, like, while he attacked Ryan, and even prior, he was saying, like, I'm not going back to jail. He has also referred to Ryan as a snitch on podcasts. I just, like, even saying that, I'm just like, ugh, why? I think it's just really clear that, like, when you lay all of this out, like, nothing that he says or, like, what's compiled here, like, based on facts, gives Brandon 1 ounce, one single reason to do what he did and take a man's life.
When Ryan's boys see this, if they see this, right, like, how are they going to feel? There's been times where I've said some stuff that could be insensitive.
Wow, I don't think that anybody could be insensitive if they accidentally murdered someone. You've even ridden off of the idea that Ryan was a snitch, and you justified it because you said he was working for the feds.
Oh, he was a snitch. He was a rat, right? Cooperating with the feds.
Ryan is described as a loving husband, father, brother, son, and so much more to people who actually knew him in his life. Despite hardships and working to overcome struggles in his life, he did nothing to deserve being senselessly taken away from his family by a man who is walking free, profiting off of lies about this story. It's Ryan's story that deserves to be heard, in my opinion, not some, redemption narrative that has never been consistent or even lined up with witnesses and evidence. From what I understand, one of Ryan's sons has filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which I truly hope he is able to get some justice from. I think the fact that Brandon has continued to change his story, it makes me feel that there's like some potential for him, being exposed, obviously, as an unreliable narrator who should have never been offered a plea deal, and now is like retracting like the story that he was given that plea based off of.
You're not telling us why you lied. What about all the lies? How come you didn't go on Ian's podcast and address all of these discrepancies?
Like, I was so just belligerent, blacked out.
Enough, man. Like a little bit later, some drama kicks off with me and Ryan, and when he blasted me, I went down. They jumped in. They were obviously his workers, and so I already had spotted that knife on the coffee table.
Remember if he confronted you about anything or if you confronted him about anything?
That never happened.
Did you confront him about anything?
No.
Ended up stabbing him 18 times.
Because you change your story constantly.
If I was anything other than a white dude, I would have received a life sentence in that county. I am extremely blessed. Again, I take full advantage. I got lucky. I was given a second chance, right?
You're not remorseful, and you were insensitive on those other podcasts because you truly don't care.
Heather has started a GoFundMe to help with the legal costs of that, which I will link down below. Anything helps. She says if, they go over their goal, the rest will be donated to victims assistance programs. Please, please, please go and send love to Heather. I cannot even begin to imagine what she is going through, seeing the face of the man who took your husband and hear him talk poorly about him on top of that. Like, I don't know what that does to you. And to see her fight so fiercely and fearlessly, it's inspiring. It's something that she should never have to do. But Heather, if you ever come across this, you are beautiful, you are badass, you are loved, and you have some badasses here in this comment section. I already know it, that are supporting you. So let us know what we can do for you. That is it for me today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.